So we're sitting here on the Upper West Side of New York with Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, National Book Award finalist, National Book Foundation 5 Under 35, best-selling author of a story collection, Friday Black, and of course Chain Gang All-Stars, which is really one of my favorite novels of the last 10 years, hands down. And we're so happy to see you tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
I'm Miwa Messer. I'm the producer and host of Port Over. We are not, in fact, taping for the show because Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah was great and joined me before the hardcover came out. And I always like a chance to talk to someone again after the book's been out for a while. The paperback is brand new. I love this book. Well, I love both of your books, but we're going to get there.
It's fine.
Except we're going to start this event with Stephen King.
Beautiful.
Because Stephen King did a really cool thing. I don't know if any of you saw this, but Stephen King...
You heard of Stephen King, guys?
This dude in Maine...
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, seriously. This dude in Maine read a book called Chain Gang All-Stars, and I actually have his exact tweet. And I am going to call it a tweet. I know it's not Twitter anymore. I'm still calling it a tweet. Chain Gang All-Stars, so good, brutal subject matter, beautiful writing. This one is from the heart. And we very much like it when Stephen King does things like that. But one of the things I wanted to talk to Nana about tonight is genre and where we're pulling influences from. Because you did this in Friday Black in the story collection. Some of you may know that Chain Gang All-Stars started as a short story that you thought you were going to include in Friday Black, and then suddenly it sort of took on a life of its own, right?
Yep.
But there is some genre happening. There is some genre. You are doing your very own thing. There's a little bit of George Saunders, sure, but I think of it as Nana on the page. But Stephen King coming around and saying, hey, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty... I was in the airport in Phoenix, like super tired and sort of like sad about my life because I was just like depressed and I was about to do in a red eye. And I saw that message in line at the Shake Shack, which I was so grateful was still open. Sorry, this is a lot of details that aren't maybe necessary, but I'm trying to paint a picture. I was in the Shake Shack. It stayed open till 11, thank God. And I was like, I ordered the thing, and I looked at my phone when I was waiting for the order, and it just like my phone, I took Twitter off my phone because it was like toxic for me. And then but I still go on the app, internet app, so that's like defeats the purpose. But anyways, I saw that and I was like genuinely shook. Like I felt like very like. Something I haven't felt in a long. It's very hard for a writer to like make me feel that way. Yeah. You know, like no one's Beyonce. You know,
he pays for a lot of poetry sections.
Yeah,
I mean, he pays
for a lot of everything for us. No, for sure. But like, I don't like. I'm not someone who like. I don't think about that my day to day. Like, he's not like to me like Beyonce, like Alan, like so like. But I felt that feeling, which was surprising. Mm-hmm. I used to teach a section of his from On Writing, his craft book, which is a memoir, and I always show this section, which kind of affected me as like a younger reader, where he talks about writers are like grouped into like a pyramid, and he's like on the bottom is the bad, and that the biggest, most people are bad, and his idea is that if you're bad, you will never ever be good, or even okay. And the top, the small part of the pyramid is the great writers or whatever. And he names like people, Shakespeare, Eudora Welty, whoever, like was super great, whatever. And then he says in the middle there's like adequate and like good. And he's like, basically if you're adequate you can become like various shades of good, but you can never be great. And if you're bad you'll never be anything but bad. And I showed it to my students mostly to like. I think as a teacher, you have to fully reject that idea. Yeah. But it kind of speaks to the sort of, I take him as a tough critic, and someone who like thinks a lot of things suck. And so to see that, it was really, really humbling and like actually made me feel something I hadn't felt in a really long time, because he's also big for me, like the Dark Tower series. I think is like one of the early times where I was seeing something that was like full of action, but clearly there was a big attention to the language and the details. So yeah, I'm still processing it, I guess, but it's something, it felt like something.
One of the things I appreciate about what he's saying too is there are some folks who put you firmly into this dystopian, this is where you live, right? You only write this kind of dystopian. And then there's some people who are like, well, no, actually it's satire. And then there are the folks who are like, no, this is literary fiction, only moving a little faster. Everyone's so quick to put a label on what you're doing.
Yeah. I've sort of just like, I know that people love, it's how people like move through the world, unfortunately. It's actually a huge problem, probably. But at the same time, if you look around any store, like you want some direction. I was trying to find, I went upstairs to the kids section because I was trying to find a book for something I was supposed to do for my publicity people for a long time now, for Barnes & Noble's actually. And I probably missed the deadline now, but I was trying to find a book, and I was kind of wondering, like, is there not a classic YA section? Which, what does that even mean?
Right.
But I was looking for like Walter D. Myers, basically. I found him. But because of where like the reader intersects with the ability to get books, labels are useful. We've sort of internalized this thing that's really just made up. That is to say that like you have to be in just one space. Right. I think that when I think of myself, but also a lot of the writers I love, they're certainly literary, which I think it'd be fun to even like, what does that mean? Yeah. But they are also writers who are not afraid to evoke ghosts or something. They're not afraid to have technology that doesn't quite exist in our world. For me, I try my best to I think Stephen King is definitely someone in that space too. Is he like a sci-fi surrealist? I don't know if people think of him that way. I think people think of Stephen King at this point as Stephen King. I mean, but like, clearly they do. He's like an entity unto himself. Yes. But he's certainly not afraid of moving in and outside of the bounds of realism. And I think when people think of quote unquote literary, usually to me the most common feature is like a privilege towards quote unquote realism. Even that though is like very, very, even the term realism to me is more fluid than people think. Some people, if you have a ghost, that's not realistic. For depending on who you're talking to, it is. So it's a interesting idea, but I accept all the badges and just be like, I can jump all the way through all of those. And it's one of my favorite things about my first book. I think it trained people to not know what to do with me, so to speak. I think it trained people to be a little bit unsure, because some of my stories are 100% actually true things that happened in my first book. And so I think people notice, and people like to attach to stories with surrealist or sci-fi or genre forward conceits, because those have a larger readership outside of the quote unquote literary space, and so then therefore the noise around them becomes bigger. But I think I just be writing mostly.
I mean, for me, when I read you, I'm looking for language. I know I'm going to get sentences that knock my socks off, and I'm going to get a lot of them in a, because we've all been there where you're reading beautiful, beautiful sentences and you're like, nothing's happening. Yeah. Or you're reading really, really beautiful sentences and you end up just pulling yourself up short because, well, that's kind of not enough. And with you, I know you're going to surprise me, and I read a lot, and I'm not easily surprised. So the fact that I can sit next to someone and say I am genuinely surprised when I'm reading Nana's work, it's electric what you're doing on the page. And I suspect that you're one of those writers where all of the writing is in the rewriting, that you're not slamming out a draft and going, okay, we're good.
No. And first off, thank you for everything you just said. I appreciate it a lot. If there's one like qualm I have with being considered in the genre or not genre like thing, I think that some people erroneously think that those who work in the genre are like somehow like phoning in the craft of working on sentences to the best of their ability. I don't think that's always true. I think that can be true, but I don't think that's like the rule. Yeah, to me, writing is the sentences. Writing is the word choice. Writing is paying attention at the syllable level, hopefully, if you can. Writing is thinking about the poetry and knowing that there's a cumulative effect of using a certain cadence of which words feel familiar to me but still feel like they're magic, not relying on any type of pretension. I don't know. To me, that is what writing is. Yeah. But that said, there's so many ways to be beautiful. There's so many ways to be I don't know, enticing with language. I feel like I'm a big fan of like music and rap, and that whole craft of the rap that I like is about how much can you bend language in surprising ways? How much can you create a literary sort of experience for a listener in a short amount of time, and make it feel rhythmic? So yeah, to me that is the foundation. The craft stuff is 100% where I start, and nothing else can happen without it. And if that, but to me, I don't like to over privilege the idea that like a bunch of other writers, I hope a lot of other writers are thinking that way. But yeah, and rewriting is a huge part of that. Just getting them as precise as you can, and also getting us a great handle of both the way the story or novel is working on a macro and micro level, and just really keeping everything really tight as possible.
Okay, I want to go back to something you just said, though, about there are many ways to find beauty, because that brings me to Chain Gang All-Stars. Because this is a beautiful novel about a very awful carceral system. It feels very, very alive, even though it's you've created this world, and I want to pull world building out of sort of, it's become attached only to sci-fi and fantasy, and it really does belong in poetry, in fiction. If you're writing domestic dramas, you're writing someone baking a cake in a kitchen in Pasadena in 1950, it's world building. It really is. And I've read Chain Gang All-Stars now a couple of times. And every single time I am struck by how much love there is in this book, and how much love you have for your characters, how much love they have for each other. That's the thing, obviously, that gets us through this story, right? And it felt like some of the reviewers may have missed that point. I feel like everyone was kind of like, well, look at this. I feel like I'm reading my homework. And it's like, well, actually, it's the characters that prevent Chain Gang from becoming a polemic, right?
Yeah, I mean, and again, like, so if I think about like how my sort of idea about writing goes, the craft of the sentence on the like as precise a level as possible is the first thing, but the very first like accumulative concern I have is about the character, meaning like that's in service. The thing that's guiding me towards what words or syllables feel true in this moment is which character is thinking them or saying them. I very almost never, I don't think you could find a time I've for more than 5 pages occupied like this like super omniscient third person. Right. If I go to third person, it's almost always very close to a particular reader. And in Friday Black, it's mostly first person. Right. And if I use third person again, it's very close to someone. I'm interested though. I've been thinking about this more. When I like sort of self-analyze myself, those writers who can just like say those like sort of aphorisms that like these like just true things in the middle of whatever's going on. I think of Zadie Smith is who first comes to mind in that sense, who could just like, this is like a kind of a God's truth kind of moment, and then go back to whoever else. And I'm sort of hesitant to do that. I probably did like once or twice in this book, and usually when the reason that it emerges for me is when I'm sort of trying to connect to the collective consciousness of like a group or like a crowd. Is like the closest I'll get to doing that, because it seems almost like something like that. Anyways, back to what you said though. I do love the characters. Yeah. I spend a lot of time with them, and it'd be really annoying to like fully hate them all. But over years you're working on that thing, and to me, and I like revision. And to me, a big part of the revision process is getting to know the character better, paying a little bit more attention. If you pay enough attention, if you look at someone closely enough, you will love them. I was like kind of like one of my grand like implicit theses. And so by having that care, and also because of that close third I'm talking about, or first person, or whichever, I try to operate from their point of view. And it's my belief that no one is just walking around like, let me be evil today. You know, almost always people are trying to do good for themselves, at least, at the very least. And in that, I can feel sort of community with them. And so it gets a lot easier to love when I'm in that space. I think it's connected, again, like some of this is things I don't think of super consciously, but I think it's part of why I don't love feeling occupying that super omniscient place, because it feels closer to like what we do in our judgy ways anyways, where we're like, we kind of have presumed that we're God and that guy over there is just an idiot, but we have no idea of what they've been through.
Right.
And we have no idea of what they've sort of had to struggle with and how hard they're trying, even as they're failing, you know, in our eyes, quote unquote, failing. And so to me, it's a big part of the thing. And and when people think of the George comparison, a big part of, if you read George's stuff, I've talked about this a lot lately because it's important for like what I think I'm actually connected to is like he has a hyper close third person, if not a first person. Yeah. Was to say like the sentences are very, very closely crafted to mimic a very specific like thought pattern. And it embeds you really deeply into this person, and therefore you can be sort of, whether you know it or not, you get pretty connected to them, even if they're like totally the worst. And so I like that. I like playing around with that. And in my first book, there's a story called Light Spitter, and there's a character in the beginning. He's a school shooter. He's about to do like a shoot at school, and part of the what could be perceived of love that I have that can be felt from me, the creator, the writer of that story, is that entering his mind from his point of view and presenting a really obviously terrible way of thinking, but one that is genuine to him. Right. And obviously, like in the course of the story, he sees the folly with where he was, but he was really fully sort of enraptured with this sort of hatefulness. And by doing that, and I did that by reading some of the letters of these kids who do these terrible things. And so it's for me, it's just a way of, to me, it's just fundamental to my writing process, being willing to love that character, because to me, being willing to love them is to like being same as being willing to be them. And if I start from there, what the phenomenon you're talking about kind of emerges, hopefully, most of the time.
But also, shouldn't our art be a place where we can wrestle with these big ideas? I mean, what's the point, right? We're supposed to be reflecting our worlds back at ourselves through our art. We shouldn't just be sitting around going, oh, that's a very pretty thing, or that's a very I mean, for want of a better phrase, art isn't black and white, right? Yeah. Like, it's just not. And so to have... One of the things about Chain Gang for me is that the action never stops, but I never felt like I was being pushed to follow a narrative. It was just like I didn't want to stop turning pages, and I really did not want to put the book down. And so the first time I read it straight through. I may have canceled dinner on someone. I'm kind of notorious for doing this. Everyone in my actual life knows that to read a book? Yes, I've done it. Do you tell them why, or
yes?
No, because there's no point in pretending. I'm a very bad liar.
That's good. I appreciate that.
I'm a super bad liar where I'm just like, I have to finish.
I appreciate that, but I think I would be kind of upset if you were like...
it has to be deployed selectively.
Yeah.
Very selectively with great care, but I'm going to own the fact that I've done it.
That's great. You could lie over like a text, though. You could just tell like a text lie. I love it. I think it's better.
I'm really bad at it. I'm
such
a
people pleaser. I could never do that. I could like want with my whole soul to stay in and read a book, and I would never tell them. It's so sad. I really respect that. This is like a goals for me.
I have designed my life well.
You have.
That's pretty much what it comes down to.
I'm going to talk to my therapist about this. I'm going to be like...
But there is, to be transported in the way that Chain Gang or Friday Black, your work is so distinctively yours. Yeah. And I will follow you down a rabbit hole anywhere. And I sort of joke around that I have terrible taste in movies. I love big action movies where things blow up and there's really no story and the characters are just, are you kidding me? Because if I'm watching something, I don't really have the brain span. Like, it means I can't, I just need stuff happening on the screen. Yeah. And yet with you, everything has its purpose. And how hard is that to structure and stay with and know if you've got the right direction?
It's how hard is it? Very. It's a big part of the revision process. Okay. And sometimes you don't know where you're going till you know where you get, you know? So you kind of have to, by the time what was difficult about this is it took so long to get to the end initially that it's hard to know what ends up being superfluous earlier on, right? Because you don't know where you're gonna go.
Yeah.
At least I don't. And so when you finally get there, in the beginning, you're just trying to. I think you follow what feels like there's energy, follow where there's heat, follow where you feel interested, where you care. To me, it's usually rooted in these characters. And then by the time you get to the ending, you start understanding the shape of what the book could be. And then the real game starts, even though you spent years on the fake game, is to like, now I'm going to sort of finely tune that sort of direction that you're talking about. I'm going to make a real choices to tape things. And in this book, there's like some really dramatic things that change over the course of revision. And I mean, it's funny because you start to forget a little bit, like what was true in the first version you sent out. Even though like usually by the time it's my first first draft that I'm sending my editor's over here. Her name is Naomi Gibbs, by the way. Hi everyone who can look at her. She doesn't like when I do that. I wonder when I sent Naomi, it probably wasn't like the first draft, but it was like I had done a couple. And this book starts off right in the beginning, or like what eventually the current beginning. First off, is not the beginning. That changed. Okay. So that's something already. Something from like the middle became the prologue-ish thing. Okay. But that wasn't that big of a change because temporally it made sense anyways. There was like a flashback in the book, which we just made at the beginning, which was a great decision. But there was in the very beginning of the book, there's a murder that is huge, that shapes sort of, it almost becomes like the inciting incident. Yep. And I don't know if that was even the beginning when you saw it like the first time. Was like the sunset stuff true in the beginning? I don't know if it was even true in the very beginning. And I know for sure though what wasn't true in one of the drafts is that I had secrets about who had done it that lasted very long, and eventually I moved those like way up.
Oh, I'm glad you changed the pacing. Yeah. I'm just knowing. I'm pretty sure I know exactly the points you're talking about, and it's just like, oh yeah, okay.
Well, I tell my students all the time, if you're a writer, I don't know if y'all are writers here, but I can probably guess that y'all are, or some of y'all are, and if you're writing like a 20-page story and you have like a reveal on page like 18, I almost always say put that on page like 2. And let there be like a real reveal, because a reader can feel you like this, and it gets condescending after a while. You're like, don't worry, I have nothing behind my hand. And they're like, I can see you have something behind your hand. And then if you do that, then you allow kind of some space for like a new like true reveal. And so, that all those type of things come from being willing to revise. I have a lot of respect for people who can just do that on the first go. I don't think it's inherently better. I just think it's dope if you can make something beautiful that way, but I don't have that ability.
Okay. I'm going to bring in some questions from the audience because there's some pretty good questions. Yeah. The emotions from this book stayed with me for a long time. How did you deal with the themes and scenes from the book on a daily basis?
It's difficult. I think I had a practice that first off, number one, the world is already really bad. The hardest part of the book is knowing that like I'm thinking about something that is true and real and very present, even though I'm telling it in this way that feels slightly removed from our current lived experience. So that's number one. In some ways I felt good because at least I wasn't like blind. It's like I kind of felt like I had like seen something that like I was like not seeing, and I rather like see the horror than being like sort of like a dream state all the way. Yeah. So there's something powerful about that. I think in general though, but I have practices and it's connected to my regular therapy, my regular sort of feeling about the world, my regular energy. Like I try my best to like care about those things anyways. And a part of like certain meditation practices, like you're thinking about why are you doing this? A part of it's for the good of, it's good. Part of it's good for the, part of it's for the good of all sentient beings, And like I think about that. And so I try to just stay rooted in a reality that like things are really, really bad if I write this book or not. And stay super connected to a hope that things can get way, way, way better.
Was there a specific event or moment that helped propel the book forward for you?
Yeah, there's several, but one, in terms of like my writing of it, I wonder if you meant like in terms of like in the writing process, whoever asked that question meant like, that's what I'm gonna go with. Yeah. Yeah, when I settled on the idea that there'd be kind of, besides the main character, there'd be like 4 kind of others that were big. Third War Stacks, Sunset, not Sunset, Third War Stacks, Singer, and Kraft. But to get to that, I had to start writing the Hendrik Singer stuff, and then I realized, no, I have to split him up into 2 different characters. I thought a lot of the Kraft stuff was going to be Singer, like had done, and I split them up. Okay. And the story just, like, it became like there was like now 4 lanes of energy I could like jump from into each other. And I think just the kind of writer I am, I sort of need that. I need like, okay, this is that side, this is that side. I need someone here who can reflect back on them. And then same thing with Kraft, like things to reflect on each other. It creates just like, I don't know how to describe it, but it created like a certain type of energy, and that was really good for me.
Which character was the hardest to write, and who was the easiest to write?
I've gotten this one before, and it's hard to say. Like, I think, like, if someone's too easy, that means it's hard, right? Because it means that you might not push yourself to do like really interesting things. So Third War, like the language is closer to what I feel comfortable with, and is closer to like my own mind's eye, like thinking maybe. So that's easy, but that's difficult because she also has to have movement that we have to feel. She also has just a lot more to do, and I have to keep that really engaging. So on some level that's really easy, some level that's really hard. The probably diametrically opposed from her is Simon Kraft, who has a lot less time. It's a lot more explosive, like language wise, and he's difficult because he's just his things he's done are so brutal, and things he's experiencing are so brutal, but it becomes like the challenge felt very like I was so in it that it like there's not an ease, but like something that like an energy there. Right. So that's like I think about it that way. In terms of like if I think about the middle of those two, even though it's not the middle because I think his language is very inflected, the Hendrik Singer Young chapters were like, I feel like I felt impressed with myself the most. For whatever that counts for.
It counts for a lot. Footnotes. We have to talk about the footnotes. You are one of the few writers that I will indulge your footnotes. There are times. Oh, come on! I am not the only person in this space who reads around footnotes. I really I can't be the only person. But let's talk about footnotes for a second, because these are very deliberate. They're very smart. I'm not just saying that because I'm sitting next to you.
Thank you.
But let's talk about footnotes.
Yep. So footnotes are a thing. No.
They were a thing for you in this book.
Yeah, and I'm also someone who doesn't love footnotes. I think I'd like to make a writing project a little impossible sometimes. There's a lot of ways I could talk about it. One of the ways I'll talk about it today is that I wanted to create like a mechanic that could be interesting. And so I'm going to use this particular, imagine like a first person video game where like you see through the character that there's one called Metroid Prime, and you're playing this bounty hunter, and she can shoot things, but to me it's really a game about looking, because there's a way she could she could scan stuff. Certain things, if you look with a certain visor, you can scan it. And so that's a water bottle right there, but if you choose to press the trigger while looking on it, it will be like then it'll tell you Fiji water sourced from blah 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 and give you like this optional thing. And that's one way the scan works. But also sometimes you get to doors and there's like a panel next to the door, and you scan and go and now the door opens. So it's one mechanic that can do multiple things. And that's just 2 examples, but it can do much more than that. But sometimes it's encyclopedic, sometimes it opens that door. I like that because when you think about a video game about a bounty hunter, scanning objects doesn't seem like the most fun thing you would do, but it's a huge part of that game because that scan feature has a lot of like applications. So bring it back to footnotes. Why are footnotes sort of why do we tend to skip them? Why do we feel like they're kind of boring? Because when we see a footnote, aka scan the water bottle, we're traditionally only getting information about it. It's only encyclopedic. It's one dimensional. The nature of like the mechanic, if you want to call it that, which means that the also thing about the readerly experience is broken up for like more information that is traditionally outside of the story. Part of why we don't like them also for me is that I thought like my biggest core tenet as a writer was to never break the like readerly dream. That's like I went there in a dream. I would never want that to be broken.
Right.
That is to say, you almost want to forget you're reading. But a footnote really announces the text as a text because you have to mechanically move your eye to the bottom of the page. So to me, I was like, okay, there's this thing I don't like, but I feel like it's necessary. I don't really know how or why I thought that, but I had that scan mechanic in my mind. And I was like, well, what if it scans information in the world. So it can be a world building tool, meaning it tells you stuff about the fictive world that doesn't exist in our material life. That's one application. Sometimes it tells you about the history, real life history or something. So that's already two that are kind of similar, but like it's already dynamic. It can sometimes they're elegiac. They tell you about this other person's life. Sometimes they do other things that I don't want to ruin. But that's all to say that now this mechanic that is usually that we're used to seeing is very one dimensional, or like that it gets expressed in just one way, is now been introduced to dynamism. Right. It can be a lot of different things. And what does that do for me? When I identified why I don't like footnotes is because it's so one-dimensional. I've added some dimensionality to them. So now when I see the footnote as a reader, that dream is broken, but the dream is in that vacuum. Yeah. Now something like curiosity can be filled, wonder, and then wonder can even be delight, because in those like whatever 2.1 seconds it takes, you're not sure what's going to happen, and that to me like helped cure the problem that we're just talking about with footnotes. So adding that dynamism created just a whole other thing. And so like the scan mechanic in Metroid Prime, now all of a sudden what seems like, well, I don't want to like scan items, it becomes like an adventurous thing. It becomes a new way of looking. It transforms like the sort of, I don't know, carnal brain response to seeing the note. I think another video game response I have about that, is imagine there's a game where there's like treasure chests, right? And the treasure chests always give you money or like new items or whatever. I'm thinking about a game called Hollow Knight. That's usually what they give you. It gives you money. You're gonna get money. You see treasure chest, cool, or it's not exactly chest, but whatever. But imagine you're playing the game, and that's the case for the whole game. Right. Then suddenly you open the treasure chest as you always do, and this one like a monster just pops out of it. Yeah. And I remember that happened in this game, and I was like terrified. And I don't know if it's a chest or whatever. I can't remember what it was, but a monster popped out, and for the rest of the game, I was scared to open the chests because just one time, a little bit of dynamism had been added to the experience, and all of a sudden, my attitude towards it changed. Right. And so that's really powerful. It's just energy. Even though that one's kind of a negative energy, my like sort of absolute value of interest spiked every time I saw one, because not only am I happy at the potentiality for gold or whatever, more points or whatever, I'm also afraid a little bit, and that creates energy.
So all of this is story. The footnotes are story. The character, all of this,
everything in the book is story,
and it all leads to building this world that I bought into completely, because it feels just enough like it's Tuesday. Yeah. And just enough, there's that bit of dread where it's like, this is where we're going. I'm not fully prepared for this. Yeah. But I'm so grounded in the details that are just a little too close. And yet there's still people talking about Chain Gang All-Stars like it's satire. And part of me is saying, well, can we even write satire in the 21st century in the world we live in? Like, is satire even possible anymore? You're just telling a story.
It's a good question. That's another thing I was supposed to do. I haven't done, write something about satire. I'm just remembering all these assignments I've been given that I've just been blowing off. It depends on how you view satire. Like because I actually did start that essay, I have a lot of ideas about Horatian satire and Menippean satire, and I don't want to get into all that. But if you just think about it as humor to critique power
Yeah.
didn't exist still.
Yeah.
And I do feel connected to satire in some ways. It ends up feeling pretty reductive, just like all these other labels do, because the book is obviously more than just humorous and doing that one thing. But yeah, what I feel like with readers and those labels and genres is people come with a way of looking, and they are always going to bias towards that.
Yeah.
You like romance, you will attach to the romance aspect. You like what you think of as sci-fi, that will be how you read it. One of the things that used to be like my least favorite thing, well, not what I used to struggle against, and I have embraced fully, is that I think just by my person or by my attitude as a writer, I add a little bit of dynamism again to like people's approach to what something has to be. It doesn't have to be one thing. It doesn't have to be anything. It is what it is. Right. And so when those reviewers say that, I think it's because they're thinking of it sometimes in like this like tradition, this satirical tradition of Animal Farm type of energy, and they're seeing any type of conceit plus political commentary, and out of their mind just goes to satire. And also, I don't mind saying something dumb to make people laugh, as you probably noticed today. So like it's sort of it comes with it.
Funny is good too, because it gives us a chance to breathe.
Yeah.
Like you have to give people a chance. Like I might be one of the few people who do this, but I have caught myself holding my breath as I was reading, and then I end up giving myself the hiccups.
Wow.
And I mean, I'm a full body reader. What can I say? But
that's cool.
It's weird, but okay. I will take the compliment.
I appreciate it though.
No, I'll take the compliment
as a writer.
But you do. It's like punctuation, right? You kind of need to know where you can stop for a second, and that I need a laugh more than I need an exclamation point or a comma. I do like a semicolon, but I know. But when I think about what you're trying to do and the amount of research that you did, I mean, a lot went into this. I mean, not just the reading. But I want to go back to something you said in an earlier interview with someone else, and you said, Lynn Tillman taught me how to read in an entirely new way when you got to college.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is so much a piece of both Friday Black and Chain Gang All-Stars, because I can feel all of these, whether it's rap, whether it's video games, whether it's film. There's also, it's not just George, but you're pulling from so many different places. Yeah. And I want to talk about that first reading list that Lynn gave you, because you came back in a week and she was like, no, I meant come back later in the semester.
Yeah. And I actually just emailed her today, so I'm glad you bring her up. And also, I was thinking about the semicolon. I feel like semicolon is so interesting, because if you see a semicolon in something I wrote, it's almost definitely Naomi put it. I feel like I don't know if I ever, I don't know if I've ever used a semicolon just because. It's hard. I'm always like, it should just be a period. I don't mind a period ending it. But anyways, Lynn Tillman, a great writer. I don't know if y'all know her. She was at SUNY Albany when I was there, and it's funny because if you think about how I write now and what she writes, you probably can imagine like a more different person for me, because people think of George and she's like we're in the same lane, kind of, at least with Friday Black, and Lynn is like the.
I never would have seen it if you hadn't admitted it. I mean,
it's so far from me. But Lynn grew me in a lot of ways, because that same thing. So you'll probably never see me use an exclamation point either, because Lynn does not like those. I don't know if you've ever seen me. I know you can know like if I've ever used exclamation point, because I have this like I've internalized idea that it means that the sentence is too weak.
Right.
You know. I very, very rarely use italics unless it's like a very clear, obvious, super reason. Like I'll never use italics to emphasize a word. Almost never, for that same reason. So those are like these like core things that people won't really know, but it's like I kind of got it from this like kind of old school. Like she has that red pen with totally like totally destroy your paper with marks, and like I embraced that in like an early age. I really like that. One of the things I think I'm getting away from the question a little bit, but like I was at a school, I can't remember where I was, but it was recent, and maybe St. Louis, and someone said that now that you know you're being taught, is there something you like fear?
Right.
And they just gave me a new complex. Not my worst fear. One of the fears I have is that because people see my stuff and identify most closely, or people feel most connected, or people talk the most about these like big premise forward idea heavy things. Yeah. They get away from the idea that it's like my sort of credo, my thing is like, you be simple, you be precise. You know, like on a sentence level, and even again a syllable level, and that's where the writing is. I went to some other school and they were like talking about the genre thing. When I was in school, it was very much like, you know, quote unquote literary realism felt like the main thing. But George was there, so there was always like, at least Syracuse is great because there's a lot of freedom. No one's trying to make you do one thing. I went to some other school, again, I can't really remember what school it was, but they were going around the room like, introduce yourself, and they were like, I'm a speculative I write speculative. They had, and I think because they knew who I wrote, they felt like I was gonna be like, yeah, gang type of thing. And one of them's like, I'm a dirty realist, because like they're trying to say like, y'all are speculatives, I'm sorry. And I was like, haha, kind of joking about it, but part of me made me kind of sad. This is MFA I'm talking about. I was like, the thing you guys are identifying is like just not a thing. Right. Or I don't think of it that way. Right. I discovered that word speculative, I say it all the time, in like one of my early reviews, and I was like, how dare they? Then I researched, I Googled what the word even meant, and I was like, oh yeah, that is me, I guess. Right. I had never thought about it once ever. So there's like a thing that people, even they've internalized it too. On the other side, was like, I have to be this, that, the other. And I'm not saying it's not bad. It's the worst, but it's like, it can be limiting. And anyway, so back to Lynn. When I think about my starts, I read a bunch of fantasy. I read a bunch of this and that. I never thought about Walter Dean Myers like, what genre is this? Right. You know, I was like, I like this story. When I was Harry Potter, whoever, I'm not like, this is a fantasy with some blah 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 dark undertone. I don't know. Like I enjoyed it, and so my fear. This is not the question you asked, but it's like a weird thing I've been thinking about, is that like people will see me and think that like I'm going from the idea of write something speculative first and then finding my way to this. And I'm like, no, to me it's really backwards. Right. It doesn't matter if the story has a dragon. I don't care if the story is about your divorce in your apartment in Massachusetts. Like, write the words, make the world real to them, because if I was an astrophysicist and I'm talking about from my perspective, it'd be sci-fi to you. You know, it's about that story, make that real. Right. And so anyways, I feel like I forgot the Lynn part, but
well, the Lynn part was just she changed the way you read.
Absolutely.
And you did actually kind of answer that.
She made me pay attention to like, what is this person doing on the sentence level, and she introduced me to a big breadth of writers. Like I said, I got James, I got Baldwin from her, I got Saunders from her, I got she was really big on Grace Paley. Yeah. And there was never like a this is that or this is that. It was like, this is a PDF, this is a PDF, this is a PDF. And it just made me like, oh yeah, I'm doing the thing. I remember reading Bartleby the Scrivener in a PDF, a thick PDF, and I'm like, I don't know what genre do people count that as? Is it like, it's like sort of like satire?
I just call it Melville.
It's like sort of a satire about capitalism, though, I guess.
Yes, it is. Technically, yes, it is a satire about capitalism. I just really think about it as Melville, because that's really,
what it really is,
what
though.
I got, is
because
Melville.
It's not ha 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 funny. It's like, oh, this is like kind of like really sad, and also are all of us toiling away for the machine like him. But you know, and I prefer not to. That's in my head. I don't think like it's that thing. It's Melville.
There was a moment where that may have been my screensaver in college while I was working on something that I really didn't want to do.
You realized it. You feel like...
Oh, it was not for me.
It's a great question.
I love the idea, though, that we can change the way we read and that we can change the way we interact with whatever text we're looking at, right? Like...
It's super true.
Right? Our taste can change, but it's not just taste. It's also, you know, we bring what we bring to whatever we're reading, but it's everything, right?
It's everything, and we're already doing it. The number one comment, if I go on Goodreads, people would be like, I don't usually like blah, 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 but I love this. It's because you have been exposed once or twice to something, you cut yourself off from it, and now you told yourself a story that you don't like X. Oh, I don't usually like fantasy, but Game of Thrones is your favorite show. It's not about that thing. Yeah. That's just, it's such a weird, it's just a closed off imagination. It's in all aspects of living. Right. You have a very small sample size of examples. You've decided to like discard a whole thing because of it. And I find if we're going to talk about genre, like sometimes I feel like the genres that I can like understand clearly is like a detective novel has very specific formal expectations.
Yep.
And that is I can like think about that. But even this book has like some detective novel tropes. Oh, someone's dead in the beginning. Who did it? We don't know. But it doesn't follow that path. But like in a romance, for example, as well, has like formal things that people are that are kind of definitive. Outside of those like formal expectations, to me, I'm like, it's just, we're just trying.
I need language first. So, I mean, there are people who read for story first. There are people who read for character first. I need language first. Yeah. But for me, when I'm reading you don't separate language and character. You don't separate language and character and story. And you have at the center of this book, not just love for the community, but, well, you've got black women written about in a way that centers them so gorgeously. They also happen to be having a relationship. You obviously are not a black lesbian.
Yeah.
I mean, but I want to talk about that for a second and stepping outside of yourself and putting yourself, because I love Loretta. Yeah. I love that woman so much. Stax is great, but Loretta really is.
Yeah.
But can we talk about that for a second? Because clearly the language, the story, the character, it all really comes back to them.
Yeah. To me, like the language or the writing is how it's how everything comes to be. It's the tree, whatever that you have to chop to make your house. The house was made of wood, and that's the floor and that's the roof. But how did you get the wood from? And that wood determines how that thing can be built. In terms of Third War and also just writing black women, I've had in my first book, a short story collection, and so I had the experience of writing from a lot of different perspectives. And before I wrote that book has 12 stories. Somewhere in my in the internet of like my personal archives, is like 80 stories that just never came out.
Right.
And similarly to the way, at least I think this is part of why I wasn't afraid to at least try. I think that I've never thought like, oh, I'm supposed to write from the perspective of men. Right. And in fact, when I was in MFAs, when I realized like, oh, we're having this like really serious conversation that's like everyone's afraid of about like writing outside of perspective. I feel like every other day in class, it was like we had to have like this 20-minute like sad, somber moment of like worry. Again, and then there's mostly white people in that class, and they were like really thinking about that, writing outside of their experience, because they were trying to be like like allies, I guess, and like it was like this fear-based space. For me, I try my best to have a lot of respect for the character, embody them as someone who's trying to do good for themselves, and maybe and have a really good sense of the context that forms their perspectives, and make them reasonable. Yeah. Reasonable, smart, maybe a little bit more capable than me, but like, it wasn't like I didn't think I was taking a grand leap. Right. That said, though, I also feel very comfortable knowing there's like extreme limitations to my perspective. It's outside of my personal identity. But that's true every time I write a black guy not named Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah from born in Queens, New York, and what I'm saying, like there's a lot of limitations to my person regardless. I'm very limited, and I don't like hide from that. And so in that sense, though, I do think about trying. I did read other people who like I mean I already did, so it didn't really have to, but I was already like reading with some intention and tried to think about, make sure I'm not misrepresenting this. And then you have readers and editors who are also like helpful in some of those regards. But it was really just about thinking of them as with like respect and love, and letting it come from there.
This has been optioned, right? Chain Gang. All of the stories in Friday Black have been optioned, and Chain Gang's been optioned, right?
Chain Gang's been like fake optioned. Well, I'll say it like this: like we'll see.
All right. If anyone wants to option, I can't help you, but please.
If anyone wants to option it, if anyone wants to give me like $5 million just for no reason.
I would really love to see this.
That's not how much I'm getting for optioning it. I wish that was the case.
Yeah, but if the right person got their hands on this could be a really beautiful, smart. Because not every book translates to the screen. Again, we know this. Some things translate well. Some things you're just like, oh, thank you, no.
We're gonna do it. No, we're doing. I'm working the pitch like now. I'm supposed to be doing it like probably right now. I think it's gonna happen, and it's pretty cool. And I'm doing it myself and with other people, but I'm doing it myself, and we're gonna try our best to do it. It's scary because it could be very, in my opinion, ethically catastrophic if you do it wrong.
Yeah, it's in the hands of someone else. I would be worried. I don't worry about.
It could be like legitimately evil. But no pressure. It's fine.
We have a couple more questions, and then I realized. Because we can keep going for a really long time, I should probably wrap it up soon. But any plans to explore bringing down the system within the book?
Do I have plans to, like, in life?
I'm working with what I had on the index card.
For sure. I hope so.
Yeah.
Even doing the show was a part of that. But also, like, I think, like, if the question is, do I think that just writing about this is enough? Personally, no.
Right.
Even though some people like think differently, I personally think no. I have the ability and energy to. Again, it might look a lot of different ways.
Right.
It might be me just going to visit prisons. It might be just I work already with a group called the Rockland Coalition to End the New Jim Crow, and I've been missing them a lot because of the tours and stuff. And I just told that one of the other steering committee members I'll be back in March. So yeah, absolutely, it's burning down that system, but also when I think about abolition, I like to remind us that it's also about adding things too. It's about growing our capacity to have compassionate responses to mental health crises, the disease of drug addiction, growing our capacity to see and recognize that prisons as they are individualized and criminalized systemic issues like poverty.
Right.
So it's just as much about growing things as it is burning things, but you got to burn things too.
Incarceration, too, is a metaphor for all of us. It's not limited to one segment of our population. And that's the one thing that I always hope when someone picks up the book. Sometimes it feels maybe like it could be a reach for certain pieces of our communities, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, well, anything's kind of possible.
Yeah.
Right? And you have to start somewhere. Ruha Benjamin, who's a professor at Princeton, she's got a book out now called Imagination and Manifesto, and she's actually covering some of that ground. And I would love to see people sort of reading you two in tandem.
I love it.
Yeah, there's something there. But what's next?
What's next? Film stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. What I was gonna say about the other thing is like, the carceral thing. It's all of us. It's not. It's beyond the country.
Yeah.
The same attitude that allows us to put humans in cages, the same that allows us to feel fine about enabling and financing genocides. It's the same energy. It's the same thing. It's the same heart. But what's next? Maybe the film stuff. I have an idea for I have short stories that I'm working on. I think the next book will be a short story collection. I've been playing around with nonfiction. Like, I don't know. I'm scared a little bit of that.
Oh, but that kind of means do it, right? If you're a little scared.
It's actually making it really jump the line too. I think I feel 100%. Like what I feel like most afraid to do is almost like what I feel like I have to do right now.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to like temper that with these other things that I have to do or really want to do. So I think that's gonna happen as well. And I've been playing around with like music stuff. We'll see what the timeline is, but I think I want to put out like a little EP thing.
So basically you're not going to sleep ever again is what you're telling us.
I know. Yes, exactly. And I've been running around so much. I will sleep. I'll find a way. I'm teaching too, but
dude,
we need let's see what happens.
All right, I'm really happy you're still teaching though. I love the idea of you shaping new minds. That makes me really, really happy. Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, thank you so much for joining us at Barnes & Noble. We're always happy to see you. Chain Gang All-Stars is out in paperback now. If you haven't read Friday Black, I'm going to ask you to read that too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all.